Hello, and welcome to Churchy Chats with the Church Girl. My name is Alicia Wiley. If this is your first time here, I am the owner and creator of A Church Girl, which is a lifestyle brand and a clothing line that seeks to inspire and uplift everyone we have the privilege of connecting with. Thank you, as always, for tuning in to tonight's episode of Churchy Chats. I know I say it every week that we have a great show lined up, but it's the truth. I wouldn't lie to you. So listen, before we get our guest in, make sure you share this broadcast. Come on, share with your family, your friends. Get them in the room. This is something they're not going to want to miss. We are now on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. So pick your favorite platform and come on in the room and join the conversation. Let's not wait any longer. Let's get our guest for the evening, and I cannot wait for her to tell her story. I cannot wait for you to meet her. So let's get her in the room. Hello, Coach Kris. Welcome to Churchy Chats.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Alicia. I'm so excited about our conversation.
Absolutely. I am so glad that you accepted my invitation. I looked a little bit on your website and through your social, and, it's really inspiring. And I just knew your story would be something that somebody needs to hear, something that will bless somebody, inspire somebody. And right before we get into it, go on and introduce yourself to the Churchy Chats audience.
Yes, so everyone, my name is Kris Lacy, also known as Coach Kris, the Purpose Mindset Coach. I'm the owner of K-Love Consulting, which is a faith-based agency designed to help women live on purpose with purpose. I empower ambitious women to break through mental and emotional barriers so that they can learn to kind of get out of their own way, right? And build their confidence so that they can walk boldly in that. So that's a little bit about me and what I do.
Wonderful. And we're going to talk a little bit about what you do a little later on. But, many times we see people who are life coaches, and, now there are so many terms, especially with social media and all of that stuff. But we don't always know the person's story or what qualifies them. I guess you could say to be a life coach, to help other people. So, do you mind telling us a little bit about your story? I know at one point you were homeless with a 2 year old. So, let's start there. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got there, what led to it? Just share your story with us.
Okay, so I'll try to be brief on the long back end part and bring you into that moment which brought me here. Okay.
Yes, all of
Okay.
it's important.
Okay, great. So I grew up in a very dysfunctional home, and not because my parents weren't loving or anything like that, but because of some of the habits that they had. Both my parents struggled with alcoholism, and they're very hardworking people. But I think because of that, they we had it was more of like do as I say, not as I do type of
Hmm.
relationship. So I didn't have a very close relationship with my parents. So I would say that me and my older sisters kind of raised ourselves. And again,
Okay.
I had great parents, but I think that out in the world type thing. So it was
Hmm.
like as long as we were being obedient at home, going to school, doing what we were supposed to do, we were taught to work at a very early age and all of that kind of stuff. But out there, I was just trying to make it happen, right?
Right.
As best as I could.
Yeah.
And what I found myself is I was an excellent student, top of my class, always, even in high school. I was
Wow.
an athlete. I graduated with a 4.3 GPA on a 4.0 scale. The only issue was, is I think because of the dysfunction, I had a very challenging time learning who I was and how to love myself well.
Hmm.
And so I found myself in a very compromising situation. So I ended up in a relationship with a guy like junior year high school, and somebody I thought was my best friend, but
Hmm.
someone who I thought needed me and I needed him, right? It was one of those stories where I
Sure.
completely relied on somebody to
Hmm.
save me, and I was going to save him, right? We were going to be each other's ride or die. And
Hmm.
by our senior year, this person that I was with, uh, he dropped out of school because his house burned down,
Oh,
and
wow.
and so he ended up doing some things and just kind of chose a different life and got involved in some things, and
Hmm.
I stayed loyal to that, but the relationship became very unhealthy. And even though I went away to college, he ended up following me away to college, and that's how I got pregnant with my daughter while I was in college, my sophomore year of college. At that point, although the relationship was very unhealthy, I chose to remain in relationship because I found out I was pregnant, and I wanted to try to make it work for the sake of the child. Or at least that's
Sure.
how I was thinking at the time. We ended up getting married. I went on to, finish my degree. We
Mhm.
ended up getting married. I just felt like that was the thing that I was supposed to do because I
Mhm.
was a believer, but I didn't grow up in church.
Okay.
And, I felt like because I was a person that went to church, we were unequally yoked for sure.
Mhm.
um, and I just, I just wanted to honor God. And I thought that me getting married and me doing the right thing and me getting closer to God would change him. The Bible says that the husband is saved through the sanctified wife. But I knew that we were
Mhm.
not supposed to get married.
Okay.
And I did it anyway because I
Uh-huh.
wanted what I wanted.
Sure.
Um, but anyway, a couple of years into our daughter was 2 years old. I was, you know, he was working and, in and out of jobs. And I think for the most part, I was the kind of the person who would help pay for stuff, right?
Mhm.
But we found ourselves in a hardship, and we ended up getting evicted for the second time in our daughter's life. So it was like one year after another, we were evicted in the
Yeah.
middle of another Chicago winter.
Wow.
And I remember specifically, and I still like, how you have those like flashback moments. I remember because before they gave us the eviction notice, I think the lights were cut, like we lost our lights and then our gas. And
Mhm.
so before even that
Wow.
happened, I remember the very last day we had to get out, and we were in there, and I was like taking cold, wet clothes out of the washing machine, trying to
Mhm.
get them in a black plastic bag. You know what I'm saying? But it was dark
Yeah.
outside. So I'm trying to pull as many of our leftover items as we could get because we couldn't afford a moving truck. So there was things we had to leave behind.
Sure.
And we just took what we could. And so we just had, we didn't have a home anymore. We were stuck.
Mhm.
Um, Thankfully, we were able to put some of our things in storage, and one of my older sisters said that we could come and stay. But this is where kind of everything went left.
Mhm.
And although it was a stressful time, and I think our relationship was very hindered by then because of all the emotional and financial and even physical abuse from the past, I was very angry, and I had a lot of bitterness towards my ex-husband at the
Mhm.
time. And so I was frustrated, and I'm not sure what really caused it to happen this way, but it happened this way, but because it was supposed to. So anyway, we were at my sister's house, and he had dropped off me and our daughter,
Mhm.
and he said he was going outside to smoke a cigarette. And then he went outside, and I noticed probably 30 minutes later that he didn't come back in the house. So I went outside to check
Mhm.
on him, and he was gone.
Wow.
Uh, Gone. I didn't know where the car was and where he went. He took our car. He
Wow.
was just gone. And I called, and there was no answer. And this had gone on for a couple of weeks. Like he was gone with just no response to messages, nothing. I didn't know where he was. And I
Mm.
remember distinctly it was a couple weeks in, and our daughter had been asking for him. But on this
Mhm.
particular day, she really, really missed her dad. And I remember it was like a movie. We were in the basement of my sister's house in the
Mhm.
bathroom, and she was crying, and I was trying to, wipe her tears and calm her down. But I had taken her in there because she was crying so hard, she started to kind of gag. And it was like,
Mhm.
kids, when they're crying so
Yeah.
hard, they get themselves so worked up. Yeah.
Mhm.
So she started to get sick. And it was almost like a movie where I'm like looking away, and she's just crying. I hear her screaming, I want my dad in the background. I'm like, I don't know where he's at. I don't have any
Mhm.
answers for her. And my question is like, how did I get here?
Mhm.
Like, I'm an educated woman, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like, I was pursuing my degree. At the time, actually, I had moved on to start earning my master's degree.
Wow.
And so for me to be not only evicted for the second time with our child, um, and not having anywhere to go or not knowing what to do, my husband's gone. And I didn't
Mhm.
know, where
Mhm.
he was at, and what am I gonna do with my child, and what's my next step? And so it was really like in that moment, where I made up my mind that we would never be compromised like that again.
Mhm.
And I had to make up my mind that I would no longer accept whatever this was, this
Sure.
life, this situation, being broke, being in an unhealthy relationship. I had to let that go. And at that point, I kind of started to take matters into my own hands. And although he finally did get in touch with us, I think for a little bit we tried to have conversation and make things work, but
Mhm.
probably a few months after that, because I think that was in December. By March, we were no longer together, and by October, we were going through a divorce. So,
And something that stuck out to me, um, you said about your upbringing and how it wasn't what maybe seemed like it was dysfunctional, but it was definitely dysfunction. And in your upbringing. And I think a lot of us, people, period, women, though, especially, we tend to, well, I guess I don't want to just say women, let me not pick on the women. But we think that because our lives look a certain way, that we don't have any issues as it relates to it. And what I mean by that, one time I was talking to a friend and I was like, while your baggage might be, you know, single, you were raised by a single mother, or you're a product of divorce, whatever, my baggage, may look a little different, as in, my parents are still married. I was raised in a household with both of them my entire life. Just because it's good, and I hate to say good or bad, but just because it's good based on what people see and based on society, right? It doesn't mean that it doesn't come along with that's
stuff.
my baggage. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? Like, it's my
Yeah.
baggage. So my issues might not be trusting a man, but it might be like, well, my daddy was always there. My daddy always did this. My daddy always
Mm,
did that. That
yep.
can become an issue.
Absolutely.
That can become an issue, and in relationships and in situations. So I think it's important that we all realize that baggage is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's something that we all have, and we all have to kind of deal with it. And it's how we see it that I think determines how we live our lives and things like that. But you also mentioned being educated. And that's another big one because, a lot of people think that that equals no problems, or a certain kind of woman wouldn't be going through these issues. But the reality of it is, I, believe in education. I do. I think it's one of the most important things that you can do for yourself in life. But God knows that it doesn't necessarily guarantee you a certain type of lifestyle. And, many of us think, well, the worst that can happen is student loans. Well, that's a big part of it. But there are other parts that it doesn't matter if you're educated, it doesn't matter if you were raised in a good household. Some things are just sometimes our journey, and sometimes we create our own journey, which we thank the Lord that He's able to, turn us around. But things can happen to you that you're not exempt, right? You're not exempt because of how you were raised, right? Or because you're educated. You're not exempt. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because many people sometimes feel like they're better than others because they were raised a certain way, or because they're educated. They feel like they're exempt from certain things, but that's really not the case. So after you could not find your husband, you were living with your sister. What happens next?
Well, interestingly enough, God always, throughout our relationship, at least to me, this is what I took it as a sign. Something would happen where we would get into a huge thing, some sort of fight
Hmm.
or some sort of argument. And literally every time he would leave, he would end up in trouble with
Wow.
something. And so this, I remember this particular time, because remember, after we did have a conversation, I didn't want to just throw my marriage away,
Mm-hmm.
um, but it was more trying to make it work for the kid.
Sure.
And I really had to pray. And I remember specifically going to church one time. Someone prophesied over me and said, God told me to tell you it's okay to let go.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew exactly what that meant in that moment. And I really had to come to grips with I'm not just getting a divorce, right? Because I wanted to honor God, but I had to remember that God didn't tell me to pursue that marriage to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
That was what I wanted. And so while I was sitting here worried about, well, I don't want to just get a divorce because blah, 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 I was like, you wouldn't have had to have one if you didn't go do what God didn't tell you to do
Oh
to
wow.
begin with, in the first place.
A word.
So, yeah, so I had to really come to grips with that and realize I was not only hurting myself by
Mm-hmm.
staying in that relationship, but I was hurting my daughter because it was so much dysfunction there. And as she got older, I really realized like, if I stay here much longer, she's going to start to really understand what's going on
Mm-hmm.
between us. She's
Mm-hmm.
going to see the fighting, and who knows how bad it could get, right? Because
Yeah.
when we were a lot younger, before
Mm-hmm.
she was born, it was more physical fighting.
Okay.
After she was born, it wasn't like that. It was just more
Mm-hmm.
verbal abuse. But I knew I was hurting her staying in the relationship, but I also knew I was hurting him
Mm-hmm.
because of the way he was brought up and what I attempted to be to him over the years, because we were together for like 8 years or something.
Oh wow.
And so over the years, I served as a crutch.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to be his mom. I tried to be something that I was never intended to be in his life. And I think that he needed to learn how to be a man on his own.
Mm-hmm.
And also as a black man in society and where he grew up, there was already a stigma. There was his background, the things he fought through. Um, all the odds were kind of stacked against him, and I
Mm-hmm.
just became another negative influence to me. I was no longer a woman of faith trying to encourage my husband. I would
Mm-hmm.
down talk him and tell him why he would never be. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have anything good to say because I no longer have respect for him because of the way that he
Sure.
treated me and the circumstances
Mm-hmm.
that I felt like as a leader he shouldn't have allowed me and my daughter to be in.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to let it go. And there was one particular time, I want to say it was in March. This was about 8 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there was one night we were fighting, arguing, and we weren't physically living together. Remember, he didn't
Mm-hmm.
come and stay with me and my sister. Well, no, I didn't say that, but he didn't decide to come and live with us. He went and found somewhere else to go.
Okay.
Um, and so one night he just wasn't answering. We ended up getting into a fight, and I felt that I was afraid at least that he was cheating on me.
Mm-hmm.
And I went out searching for him, trying to find him, and then we got into this huge fight. And it was probably the first time we had gotten, physical with each other in years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore because somebody's gonna end up dead. Somebody's gonna end up hurt.
Wow. Yeah.
And it wasn't to the point where we were like punching each other. So like you couldn't
Mm-hmm.
see. We were just throwing each other around and I'm hitting him and he's pushing me. And it's just like
Mm-hmm.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, but this can go bad because we both had a lot of rage on the
Mm-hmm.
inside of us. And so I was done. I left. And the very next day, just like every other time, he ended up in prison.
Wow.
Or ended up going to jail. I'm sorry, I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
say he didn't. And so, but this time I didn't bail him out. I
Mm-hmm.
felt like it was almost like God, like I keep trying to take this situation away from you, and you keep running back. And I don't know how many times
Mm-hmm.
I have to do this. And so, um, I would do what I felt like I needed to do for however long he needed to be in there. So I was putting
Mm-hmm.
money on his books and stuff like that. But and I would let him call to speak to our daughter.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't have anything to say. I knew I was done. And then when he got out, I served the papers. It was during that time that I just realized I didn't love myself.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't appreciate who I was because I didn't know anymore.
Yeah.
I was pursuing my education because that's all it was my outlet growing up.
Mm-hmm.
I was always a
Mm-hmm.
straight A student. I was always able to put on this mask and go out to the world and be I'm Christy Neiman, like everybody knows
Right.
Christy, you know what I'm saying? She's
Mm-hmm.
that girl and she's involved in this and she's top of the class and she gets to be, and that's the image that I created for myself.
Sure.
But I didn't feel that way. I'm at home and when I was younger, I was fighting with my mom. And, as I got older, I was fighting with my husband.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I forgot who I was. I forgot why I was even pursuing my degree anymore. I didn't even know why it mattered to me. I just felt like it was what I was supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided to go on this journey of self-discovery. At that point in my life, I was overweight. Um, I'm used to being, or my frame is like, I was about, I think 135 or 140 is
Mm-hmm.
like my average size. I was probably 190 pounds. I was pre-diabetic. I was depressed. I was miserable. And so I started to exercise. I
Mm-hmm.
started to eat differently because diabetes runs in my family. And so
Okay.
I knew if I didn't change that, not only was my relationship bad, but my health was going to follow. And
Sure.
I needed to be well for my daughter as well. So I just started to take all the necessary actions to learn how to love myself again, to
Mm-hmm.
discover what mattered to me and realize that I'm worthy of, happiness. I'm worthy enough to experience joy. No reason should I have to settle for abuse and dysfunction. And
Yes.
not only that, I don't want my child to be a product of what I was a product of. I
Sure.
needed to break the cycle and I felt it was
Mm-hmm.
my responsibility to do the work, and that's how I started to work on my mindset. That's when I started to work on, like I said, that self discovery piece and learn what self care really looks like. And
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, like that's when everything changed for me about 8 years ago. I started my self love journey, and now here I am being able to serve and speak to other women and empower them to do the same thing and kind of to get out of their own way because that's what I had to do. I was going in the motions and I was doing the things, but I
Mm-hmm.
was holding myself back from my own greatness. I was
Sure.
not really fulfilling everything I had turned down so many opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
I quit an internship early to run back and try to be in a relationship with him. I
Mm-hmm.
had sacrificed so many things because I was completely codependent on his love and his validation, or if not his, the love of my parents and their love and their validation. It was always someone else defining what I meant to me, for me. And that had to change. And I never wanted my daughter to have to experience that or to feel like she can only have confidence in herself if somebody else has confidence in her.
Yeah, and that's so good. And something that you said also kind of resonated with me when you said, you know, I didn't want to get a divorce because I wanted to honor God, but it was something that He didn't tell me to do in the first place. And I think oftentimes we get ourselves in situations and we're like, oh, well, I don't know if this is really meant for me, or we know it's not meant for us, right? And we do it anyway. And then, so we don't honor God in making the decision, but then we try to bring God into it, So we're like, Lord, I want to honor
Yeah,
you. And He's like, well, why weren't you honoring me when I told you not to do it?
right. In the
So
first
I
place.
think that's so important because oftentimes our excuse for holding on to things that are toxic for us is God. And that's really just all it is. It's an excuse. And you help women now to transform their lives. And doing that for a living can be challenging. And I say that because it's ministry, right? So ministry is hard. And ministry is something that we do regardless of really how we're feeling or what we're going through. So, can you talk to us about where you get encouragement from and inspiration from when you need it? You spend so much of your time pushing others and encouraging others. Where is that peace for you when you go to be refilled
That
and
is
encouraged?
I love it. I love that question. And it's so interesting because you know how we have seasons, Alicia. Like, let's just be real. We have seasons where we are on it and we are feeling good and we have the energy and we are on,
Yes.
all the things and we're just super stoked all the time. And then we have seasons where it's like, Lord, where are you at?
Yes, Lord.
And, um, I experienced that even recently, if I'm being honest, because last year I chose to stop coaching. Well, it was actually God told me to stop coaching. I didn't
Mhm.
know why, but I was obedient, and thank God
Mhm.
because I ended up finding out that I was pregnant not even a month later, and
Oh
it was a
wow.
high risk pregnancy. And so
Okay.
I really needed to be well and not
Sure.
give my energy to coaching. And so there were several things he told me to do on my time off. And then I relaunched my coaching program this past June.
Okay.
And yes, God is good. Okay.
Yes.
And it has been wonderful. I mean, I'm grateful that I was obedient. But there were several things that I had faced that were really trying for me. So although we made it through the pregnancy fine, because at one point in the beginning, I was nervous that me or my baby wouldn't make it. I was having
Mm.
so many things that I
Oh
was just like,
wow.
Lord, are you going to take me with my baby?
Wow.
Or are you going to take my baby so I can stay here with my kids and my husband?
Yeah.
And um, you know, I was scared. But God told me that we would live and not die. He reminded me that I knew
Amen.
you. You know what I'm saying? And I gave you this baby. I knew it was a boy. I felt it was a boy. Let me not say I knew.
Mhm.
I felt it was a
Mhm.
boy. But I felt like He said your son, you and your son would live and not die. And so we ended up delivering fine. I could get into the crazy details of it, but we're good. But 2 weeks into 2 weeks after he was born, we got a call that said that his blood tests were a little off, right? And they had questions about or some uncertainty. So they wanted him to come out and get another blood test done from his newborn screening. And I was like, fine. But basically, we ended up finding out that the numbers, it looked like he might have something called an arginase deficiency. And it was a little scary for us because the deficiency is potentially life threatening, and
Mhm.
so we were really frightened because if a child or newborn that has a deficiency usually dies within the first month.
Wow.
And so we were 2 weeks in and got this
Oh
news.
wow.
And so God just really had to work on my heart. And I remember Him reminding me, the Holy Spirit reminded me when I was washing dishes one day of His promise that we would live and not die. And
Mhm.
then He also told me to celebrate life. And so I
Mhm.
began to do that, Alicia. I shared that word with my husband. And I said, honey, this is what the Holy Spirit said. We need to celebrate life. And so we're going to enjoy every single moment that we have with our baby and our kids. And yeah, we're going to do what we need to do, and everything's going to be fine. So, long story short, we went through the first couple of months of his life back and forth in hospitals and him being tested. And although the numbers were still off, they said we got all the genetics test results and that he has no deficiency. He is
Wow.
totally fine. He is well. They can't explain even the numbers. And he hasn't even been sick by any means. And so he's
Praise
great.
God.
And so God is good. But even during that time, I relaunched my program, my coaching
Mhm.
program. Right before I had him, I launched my workbook. It's called Six Steps to Mastering Your Day, a daily success guide for ambitious women. So I launched my workbook like literally the week before he was born. I
Mhm.
started my coaching program 2 months after he was born. And then one more month. So in July, we found out that he did not have a deficiency. And then a week later, after we were praising God, I got a message that my mother was diagnosed with cirrhosis of the liver because I told you she was a heavy drinker.
Yeah.
And so her health really started to decline.
Mhm.
And it really started to weigh heavy on me, heavier than I thought. I thought I was fine. Like I was good in
Mhm.
spirit. And I'm like, okay, Lord. I decided at that point to go into full time entrepreneurship because I felt that I no longer needed to hold on to my part time job because it was creating more work for me and less time for me to be present with my family, to be with my
Sure.
kids and be with my mom or whoever else I needed to be with. And but my hair started falling out, Alicia.
Oh
to get
wow.
to get all the way to the point, I started experiencing extreme postpartum hair loss, and then postpartum depression came, and it soon followed. And so, when I to the point of your question in terms of staying encouraged, I think we have seasons in our lives where so much is going on. We'll say and acknowledge God, but we're not staying in close enough relationship with Him. And what I realized is over the last several months, although I felt like God kept us, I wasn't always with Him. I was so busy being with my kids, right? I was so busy being with my husband and being with my mom,
Yeah.
being with work, right? Being with my clients, and it's like, but where are you with me? Where do we stand? Because I acknowledge God, Lord, I know you got this, okay. And then I praise you when you give me what I want.
Right. Right.
And
That's
He's
good.
like, where's the relationship? And
Yeah.
so I think that we have to be so intentional about keeping ourselves encouraged by staying tied to the one who created us, because He knows us better than anybody else. He knows us better than we know ourselves. And so
Absolutely.
that for sure, obviously, is where I get my encouragement from. I know in seasons of my life when I'm lost or feeling confused, is because I haven't been talking to the only person who has the answer.
Yeah.
And so that's the first thing. But then I also say, my husband is my best friend. And he's actually the person that when I was separating from my ex-husband was a friend of mine who helped me work out, who helped me to see the better parts of me, to just love me as a friend and support me and say, hey, if you don't like that about yourself, you don't have to talk bad. You're still beautiful. You can exercise.
Yeah.
And, and so now I'm married to that man. And he's the one person that I can always count on, who's going to call me out on my BS if I'm if I'm not being real,
Yeah.
or if I'm slacking. But he's also the person that's going to hug me and love me and say, Chris, you're going to be all right. And I got us. So when you feel like you don't got it, I got it. And so my husband is definitely an encourager for me. And then another big thing I would say is my circle of accountability. I have some amazing women in my life, and from my sisters to some of my best friends that I call sisters, that
Yeah.
that I can go to, that pray with me, that are there for me, that I can count on to remind me of who I am when I'm feeling. And I could be doing the work, and someone could say, "Hey, I was so blessed by working with Chris, and I feel so excited after this conversation." And I could, we could still have our moments where we go home and it's like, I'm worthless, our
Absolutely.
minds really try to tell us something. And sometimes it's not even that, because I've done so much of the work, but the enemy comes in and he tries to come in like a flood. But
Yeah.
what do we know? The Lord will lift up a standard against him. And so,
Yes.
um, I'm so grateful for the people in my life that are able to encourage me and keep me in those seasons that are trying. And that's really what keeps me going.
And it's so important to have those people in your life because sometimes it's like you said, we can hear and people can tell us how much of a blessing that we're being to them and how much we've helped them, but those feelings of inadequacy or those feelings of whatever the enemy is trying to plant in that moment will just kind of override that. And you can be, or if you can feel like at, for an hour or whatever, oh, I'm just living in God's purpose. But a few minutes later, it's like,
Out of
it's almost like a
nowhere.
high, right? Yeah. It's
Yeah.
like you fall so hard and it's like, well, what happened? But it's really just dealing with those things that are deeply rooted. And you mentioned the Lord telling you to stop your coaching, but you were able to resume it later. I think that's an important piece because, sometimes we feel like if the Lord tells us to stop something, well, Lord, this is what you told me to do, so I'm not going to stop. Or we feel like it's the enemy, telling us to stop it. But when all actuality, it may be God and He has a reason for it. And it doesn't mean that the pause is permanent. It just means that He wants us to take a pause. So it's so important for us to listen to the voice of God in that way. But as you said, you're married now and, you have a son. How, or should I say, what did it look like you trying to recover, heal, shed yourself, if you will, of your first marriage and relationship, and coming into this new situation, what was it like? Carrying those insecurities, and I'm sure some things that you had to deal with. Was it tough for you to transition from an unhealthy relationship to something that was completely different and healthy?
Ooh, honey. So, Alicia, I am cracking up because not anybody's really asked me this part, right?
Really?
Yeah, I've
Churchy
shared.
Chats
Yeah,
exclusive.
I love it. I've shared different parts of my story just because I share with my audience sometimes if I do it
Mm-hmm.
live. So I've shared little bits and pieces, but no
Sure.
one's ever quite asked me like this. So let me be real. And this is what I'm all about. I'm an extremely transparent person, which is why I
Mm-hmm.
think that, you know, I'm able to work with certain people because they really love that I'm honest. So, yes, me and my husband were, I would say, equally yoked,
Mm-hmm.
uh, or maybe not. If I, because of where I think mentally where I was trying to go, I think I was trying to go like way more into my relationship with God than my husband currently was. But he went to church. He's a believer.
Okay.
He's a man of God. But boy, um, it was a challenge. It was absolutely a challenge because if you heard, so this gentleman was someone that I was in college with,
Okay.
and we ended up starting our master's program together. And so we see each other around. We became friends on accident. It's just like you see each other all the time on campus and you say, hey, just
Mm-hmm.
keeping in touch. But we didn't really build a relationship until after I was separated from my husband.
Okay.
And so, but it was during that time that we started to get really close. And although we were friends, easily feelings started to develop really early on. And so by the time I was divorced, I was in love with somebody else.
Mm.
Although I was separated from my husband, I was already in love with someone. And, you know, whew, well, if I'm being honest, I didn't heal. Alicia, I didn't take the time
Yeah.
that I needed. I didn't do what I needed to do and what God was very specific about because
Mm-hmm.
God told me that that was my husband. The problem was the timing was really off.
Gotcha.
And so he was
Yeah.
very specific, like, be this man's friend and
Mm-hmm.
not just for you. Like, I mean, like, he's got stuff too. And he let me know, he was like, he needs to deal with some stuff. And there were
Mm-hmm.
some things that we were supposed to remain a godly influence in each other's life before we moved
Mm-hmm.
on. And we didn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, I think because of past hurts in both of our lives, we ended up becoming intimate
Mm-hmm.
before marriage. We ended up, getting into a relationship and we became probably each other's. At one point, I remember my now husband, saying that I was his heaven on earth because
Mm-hmm.
he felt like I understood him in a way that he never been understood before. And so
Mm-hmm.
really, he was really my best friend.
Yeah.
The problem with that was our relationship quickly turned into I didn't trust him.
Mm.
And because of his past hurts, it was his responses to me were, I've been hurt before and I can do without you. I'm with you or
Mm.
not with you. So when we would get into arguments, it would end up in breakups early on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, okay, Lord, what do I need to do? Because I know what you told me. And I know you told me not to get married the first time. And this time I know this is my husband, but I'm scared
Right.
to lose him because we got all this stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
he's like, again, I told you not to do this. I
Wow.
told you the timing was off. But he let me know that if I would stop being intimate with him, that he
Mm-hmm.
would heal me, that he would help me. And so I did. I stopped, and it was had a huge effect on our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And it was hard for my husband because we've been intimate. How do you just go
Right.
from, being that and not being that, and
Sure.
then months are going by, and it's crazy to him because he know I was previously married and he was as
Mm-hmm.
well, and it's like, how do you just stop?
Right.
Um, but it's like I'm giving myself to the Lord because I truly
Mhm.
want to become the wife I'm supposed to be, and I want Him to heal and help you as well. And that's what I did. And it was during that season that God taught me about grace, and He taught me how to love myself and rid myself of shame
Mhm.
and and all of that. And although there's layers, right? We still deal with things later on in life. It was during that season where I think that we, our relationship, although there was a strain on the relationship because of our sinful nature and sinful desire, I think
Mhm.
I think my husband really respected the fact that I made this choice as much as he didn't like it, and he knew
Sure.
it was the godly thing to do.
Yeah.
And so he stuck around. He stuck around and he stood beside me. and we and we we ended up he took me to the Dominican Republic and he proposed, which was also
Oh.
hard because he was like, we were not being intimate at the time. So
Right.
it was like, here we are in this beautiful place and nothing happened. But
Engaged.
yeah, engaged. And so, yeah, like, God has just truly blessed us and He's helped us to do a lot. And we've had to do a lot of the work. I mean, really, we've only been married 4 years, but we have two
Mhm.
children together, two biological children. So now I have three children. We have our daughter, Aria, together. Alina's our oldest, so she's 10.
Mhm.
Aria is 3. And then Alexander is our new baby, and he will be 5 months and 5 days. So, so yeah, so it's been beautiful. But I mean, if I'm being honest, Alicia, we had to do a lot of work, especially in the beginning of our marriage. You know how they say, like, the first, year is the hardest?
Yes.
Whew, it
That's
was.
true.
It was. Also because I had a lot of dysfunction and we weren't being intimate. We were living together. That also made it
Mhm.
hard.
Yes.
It was a lot of stuff. We were living together before we were married because I couldn't go home and be with I tried to go and live with my parents, but because of the
Mhm.
dysfunction and the things that they did in their home, I didn't want my daughter around that.
Sure.
So I had to leave. So, I mean, we've been through it all. And I really think that one day God is going to cause me and my husband to be in ministry because even if God calls you to be with somebody, if you don't do the right thing at the wrong time is the wrong thing. And
That's good.
so I think we have to be very conscious of the choices that we make and understand that God wants us to learn how to just live solo, like live with Him, live and
Yeah.
love yourself and let Him heal you. Let Him show you yourself. Let Him show you your past. I believe that heal women, heal families, heal communities. I say it all the time. Heal women,
Yeah.
heal families, heal communities. And we have to be very intentional about our healing journey so that we can break off the generational curses so that they're no longer, so our children don't have to worry about that so that we
Absolutely.
can walk in purpose. That's why I'm the purpose mindset coach. Because
Yeah.
you said something earlier where it said sometimes we don't even feel like it in this ministry. But what
Mhm.
keeps me going and what it means to have a purpose mindset is knowing that even when I don't feel like it, I'm still called.
Yeah.
Even when I
Yeah.
don't feel good, when I don't feel like I deserve it, because there were many times where the enemy tried to make me feel condemned. And
Sure.
and and, and God had to let me know there's a difference between the conviction of my Holy Spirit and the condemnation of
Yes.
the enemy. And I still love
Yes.
you. And I know you messed up. And I forgive you. And you're gonna mess
Yes.
up again, and I'm gonna forgive
Oh,
you again.
forgive
But
you
that
again.
don't mean you don't show up and serve the women that I called you to serve. And so we have a
Absolutely.
responsibility to continue to learn, to continue to grow, to continue to heal. And know that we are human. God does
Yes.
not. I think as Christians, sometimes we think that we got to have it all together, and that's so far from the truth. And sometimes I hear about people who grew up in church, and sometimes I think I'm grateful that that's not me because I
Yeah.
didn't. Because I
Right.
from what I hear is that people who grow up in church, it's like you get so used to it and you walking in it. It's like God had to pull me up out of suicide multiple times.
Mhm.
I tried to kill
Mhm.
myself more than once
Yeah.
when I was young. There were certain
Mhm.
things that I knew because I didn't grow up in church that God was real. It's like
Yeah.
this is not something that my parents just do. I don't go to church. My parents don't go to church. My parents still don't go to church.
Mhm.
um, they believe in God, but there's reasons that they don't even. Like my father has
Sure.
church hurt and
Mhm.
never went back to church since he was a kid. And
Wow.
yeah, and so, there's certain things that have happened to them. So I just knew. I knew God was real and he was the reason. When I asked him why, he like, why not? I got something
Right.
for you. And I realized you don't have to take life personally. You don't have to take the things, people not loving you well. It's not because they don't love you or because something wrong with you. It's because they don't know how to love you. They don't know how to love
Yes.
themselves. So if your
Right.
parents didn't love you or they harmed you, it's because somebody hurt them. It's because
Mm-hmm.
something happened to them. And when
Yeah.
God taught me grace in that season, it helped me to forgive, and it helped me
Mm-hmm.
to let go of the pain, and it helped me to stop hurting and being angry with my ex-husband for not being the father I felt like our daughter needed. And
Mm-hmm.
now I learned how to start to pray for that man. And although he was absent from her life for most of it, just
Mm-hmm.
recently he started to build relationship with her again, and that's because I really feel like God had to work on my heart, because I could have closed that door. I
Yeah.
left that door wide open, so whenever he
Mm-hmm.
was ready to do whatever he had to do, that they could start to build relationship. Because my husband, like my husband right now, that's her
Mm-hmm.
daddy. She know
Yeah.
who her daddy is. He's been in her
Uh-huh.
life since she was 2 years old, and that is the man that she calls father. That is the man that she trusts,
Mm-hmm.
that she has relationship with, and they have a beautiful relationship, and I'm grateful for him. And
Yeah.
so there's no fear or discomfort about her biological father coming back into her life,
Sure.
because she has everything that she needs, and we don't have to worry about him hurting her or anything like that. We can just let God do his work. But it took for me to have to heal in order for me to be able to keep even that door open.
Yeah, and that's good. So often, um, I don't know, women talk about it, but they don't really talk about, how we sometimes are the reason that our children, don't have relationships with their fathers or even with just people, period. I don't know if we realize how we really hold the key to certain things, and if our hearts are not healed, right? Because this is a man who you had been through a whole lot with, and you could have been like, well, forget about, I don't want to say forget about her, but based on our situation, when, you don't even get an opportunity to be in her life. And I think that's big. And I think it's important that as mothers, I'm not a mother yet, but I'm believing God. But I do think that it's important that we realize that we can't necessarily stand in the way of certain relationships. And my mom always says, well, you chose them. So,
Listen.
so if it's something that you didn't want, and outside of abuse and things like that, we have to allow, and not just our children, but people in our lives, because we can get very protective over our friends and family, and we know about their relationships, we know about their situations, and then we're just we put on our cape, and we're like, no, you can't, or you can't. But all of this is a part of people's healing journey. And even if it's hard, we have to allow people to heal in the way that they need to heal. And we can't always control that. But I saw something on your website. It said, let's get something straight. I only work with ambitious women. Now, when I saw that, I didn't necessarily take it as, and this may have been what you meant, and I didn't necessarily take it as, people who are super goal driven and, willing to do the work, which I know that's what you meant in some aspect. But how it spoke to me was somebody willing and ready to do the work necessary to change. How important is it? I'm sure people come to you all the time. I'm ready, let's do it. And in their heart of hearts, they're just not ready. But how important is it that you are ready for change? Even when you say it with your mouth, then it's not necessarily in your heart yet. But how important is it that that change is in your heart before you even can pursue change? Because it's easy for us to say, I want things to be different, but we're saying it with our mouths and our hearts. We really want things to kind of stay the same. How is it? Well, twofold. Let me ask you this. How important is it that we are ready for change in our hearts, but also how important is it, or how are you able to help women who are saying it with their mouths and not with their hearts yet? Can you still help those women to get ready for the change or to really understand what it means to want it in your heart, if that makes sense?
That's a good question. So I'm going to answer the second question first, because
Okay.
although it's not a service I offer, I think that's what attempt to do when I do live stories or when I do my captions on my, because I want to pull on the heartstrings of the woman who knows she wants to change, but there's some little things she needs to do still. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? She needs to really come into full realization and acceptance that she's going to have to let some things go. And I think that that's what it is for most women who say they're ready. They're not ready to let go of the comfort
Yeah.
of the dysfunction that they're in. Whether it could be something as simple as I'm sabotaging myself through procrastination, or it can be something as big as I'm in an abusive relationship and I want to leave, and it don't have to be physically abusive. It could be just
Sure.
physically or mentally, or I'm sorry, spiritually or mentally or emotionally or whatever, financially abusive. I experienced all of those in my first marriage.
Yeah.
And it could just be like I keep finding myself in toxic friendships, or I keep settling for jobs that are less than, or I get paid less than what I know I deserve. It's a
Yeah.
lot of different things that could be blocking you, but those women are still standing in their own way. And if I could just tell a story really quickly, when
Sure.
you asked me about my husband, my now husband, in terms of dealing with the insecurities and all of that, our relationship had gotten so rocky at one point that I felt like it was going to end, and I got scared.
Wow.
And I'm like, Lord, okay, this is what you said was mine. And in terms of our relationship, and I don't want to lose this man. I love him. My daughter has a relationship with him. I do believe he's meant to be my husband. What do I need to do? And I remember God said, can you give him up for me? And it was in that moment where I had to cry and say, sorry, Lord, because I gave him your position in my life.
Wow.
I forgot that I left my first marriage to begin with to be with you, to learn to love myself again. And here I am, insecure and scared of losing another man,
Wow.
when, Lord, you already said he was mine. So I don't have to be afraid. And I really had to go deep down and say, am I okay with letting go of the very thing that makes me feel safe, so that my heavenly Father can show me what real safety is? And when I went on that journey, it changed everything.
Wow.
It changed everything. This was right before, I think, right before I got pregnant with our daughter, my second child. And it was everything. And I'm so grateful. What was this? This was probably 4 years ago, because she's 3. So this was probably 5, I'm sorry, 5 years ago. I'm sorry, I'm getting my numbers all crazy. Yeah, so 4.5 or 5 years ago, because when I line it up. But yeah, she wasn't in the picture yet, and we were living together. And so God was just like, you're scared that he's doing something. You don't trust him. And it's like I was just pushing him away. What's that scripture that is worse to live in? It's better to be on the outside of the house during a storm than to live in the house with a quarrelsome woman. And that
Oh,
was me.
yeah.
I was hurt. Like, and not because I wasn't a good woman on a day-to-day basis, I was,
Sure.
but I was insecure in certain moments. And it would cause me to be it was like I was interrogating him, or I was scared. Don't go nowhere unless I'm going with you. Or, it was just bad. And it's not because he ever had given me reason that he was cheating. It's because I was cheated on before. It's because I'm afraid to lose you. And God was like, you're going to have to be okay with losing him if it means loving me. If it means learning to love you and
Yeah.
become secure in who I said you were. Your identity at this point is tied to his presence in your life. And so I said that to say, Alicia, when people come to me, they have to know that they're going to have to give up something.
Yeah.
You're going to have to give up something. You're going to have to give up your, I know this sounds crazy, but some people struggle with just giving up the finances to invest in themselves.
Yeah.
It's like, I'll go out and I'll spend tons of money on shoes or a purse or somebody else, not even on myself or
Right.
whatever, but I can't spend this much money because it's a big investment. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
Now there are coaches who charge less than me, and there are coaches who charge more than me for sure.
Sure.
But it's a big investment. And so people sometimes that stops them because it's like, I'm not spending, but you're gonna have to give up something to get something.
Something. Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? And so
Mm-hmm.
whether it's money or whether it's a person or whether it's a mind, a old belief system, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
a job, you're gonna have to let something go. And if you're not
Sure.
really ready to, because I always say, and I'm sure you've heard this before, you can choose to be uncomfortable in your misery or be uncomfortable taking steps towards your future.
Yeah.
And so I'd rather be uncomfortable doing what's scary and moving forward and
Mm-hmm.
doing what I know God has
Mm-hmm.
called me to do than to sit back and stay uncomfortable, knowing I want more, knowing that God has more for me.
Absolutely.
But because I'm choosing to be uncomfortable in my comfortability, uncomfortable in
Sure.
my security that I've created for myself, um, I'm stagnant. And that's not the life I want for myself. So the woman has to decide, I don't want to be uncomfortable stuck. I want to
Mm-hmm.
be uncomfortable making a difference and changing my life.
And that, whew, listen, that anybody listening can get something from that, because you touched on so many things: relationships, finances, comfortability. You just, touched on enough for it to have spoken to somebody. Being a coach, though, requires, you kind of pulling people and coaching them. I think when we hear the term life coach or purpose coach or whatever, we don't tend to think about like a coach of a sport, right? Because if we were to willing to, or if we just were able to kind of just line those similarities up, a coach of a sport, you expect them to push you. You expect them to tell you you have to change your diet. You expect them to condition you and all of that stuff. And you're getting ready for something that's bigger than you. You're getting ready for the big day. You're getting ready for the big game. And I think many of us could probably take it better if we put our minds in the area to say, okay, this is going to hurt. Just like it hurts to work out and lose this weight and deny myself of this piece of cake, it's going to hurt for me to give up the things that I need to give up. It's going to hurt for me to make the sacrifices that I need to make. But if we look at it, like in the physical, like we're getting ready for this big game or this big day in your life, you're getting ready for your destiny. You're catapulting yourself into your destiny by conditioning yourself, making sacrifices. So it's so important for people like you who do what you do, who have traveled the road that you've traveled, are so important. And your willingness to tell your story, right? So many people are kind of stuck, not because they necessarily want to be, but because they may be embarrassed. They may feel like it's their fault. And yes, there are parts of our story that we have to own. We have to say, okay, I'll admit this part was my fault, but it's through us being able to tell our story and being able to share our testimony and to share our faith that we are able to often free ourselves and often help other people. So to be able to tell your story is wonderful. And I know that just not just because you're a coach, but because you have a testimony, I think often people feel like, whether it's a preacher, whether it's a teacher, whomever, they're like, how can you tell me if you've never been there? So I think, the importance of letting people know, look, this is where God brought me from and he can bring you from as well. It's so, so important. I appreciate you coming on Churchy Chats to tell your story. And before you go, I would like for you to tell the people, what services you provide. If they are interested in having you as a speaker, or they want to get in contact with you for anything, please tell the people how they can connect with you and possibly have you as their coach if they're ready.
Yes,
Only if you're
if they're
ready.
ready. So I definitely am coaching one-on-one. It is very limited though. The one-on-one coaching is by application only. So it's not like you can just apply. I mean, you can
Hmm.
just pay and coach with me. No, you have to go through an application process because I want to make sure that one, I'm right for you, but also that you're right for me. I
Sure.
think again, we have to make sure you are actually ready to make the investment and to do the work, because I don't want you, let's say you have the money to spend, because some people don't necessarily, it's a sacrifice, I guess,
Sure.
financially. But for other people, it's like, no, I have the money, I don't have a problem, but please keep your money if you're not going to do the work, you know?
Right.
And so, yep. So I do offer one-on-one coaching. You can visit my website. It's chrisspeakslife.com. That's chrisspeakslife.com. And I'm the same on Instagram and on Clubhouse, Kris Speaks Life at chrisspeakslife.com. So, it's Kris. I'm sorry, because some people think the other Chris. So it's Kris speakslife.com. And yeah, so I do offer one-on-one coaching. I'm super excited because I actually have a pre-launch going on right now for my e-course coming out. Yes, yes, yes.
Wonderful.
Yes, because there's so many people who want to work with me, who don't have can't make the one-on-one investment. But
Mm-hmm.
specifically, I found out that there's so many women right now that are struggling with confidence. And it's
Mm.
not like I've done a lot of the other work, but it's just that confidence piece, right? And so
Sure.
I created a course called Get Your Mind Right. It's building confidence and success for ambitious mompreneurs. And it's an 8-week course that I created, and it launches October 1st. And
Okay.
so right now I'm doing pre-sales, which is great because it's less than half of what the course is going to be going for in October. So people can reach out to me if they're interested in that. They can shoot me a DM, or I'll eventually have the link in my bio where they can go and get the pre-sale. Just go straight to get the link for that. I also have a workbook out. It's a digital download. It's called uh, 6 Steps to Mastering Your Day. It's a daily success
Mm-hmm.
guide for ambitious women. And I offer that because I think a lot of us, we have all the things except the structure that we need in our
Mm-hmm.
day to be intentional. And so it just brings a new level of intention. And the way that it's created is these 6 steps. It's called spread. It's called the spread method. And because I think as women, we spread ourselves much too thin, and we try to do
Mm-hmm.
too many things, and we need to learn how to prioritize and bring into alignment what's most important, and we get to choose how we spread our day, and
That's
so
good.
spread ourselves throughout our day. So I created this spread method. um, that's currently on sale, so you can go to my shop on my website to get that as well. So yeah, that's it. If you'd like me to come out to speak, I'm honored to do that. I've been speaking for years, and I absolutely love being able to go out and speak to groups of women, whether it's at a conference or even young people, because I used to mentor high school girls, and that's really where my heart is, because I want to make sure they realize all of these things before they go into adulthood, and they can hopefully avoid some of those mistakes that we've made and have to go back and fix in adulthood. So
Yes.
yeah, so that's it. Chris, everything is Chris Speaks Life, and so you can find me if you go on any social media or on my website.
Wonderful, wonderful. Listen, thank you again for coming on Churchy Chats. I know that your story, or something that you said, your services that you offer will be a blessing to somebody. So thank you so much for coming on to tell your story and, to help some people along the way. Sometimes it can be tough. Churchy Chats. Sometimes, we have current events and hot topics and things like that, but we shift it a little bit, and that doesn't mean that that's gone. However, I do believe that the Lord ordained every single situation, and even if it's just for one person watching, I believe that the story that's told, the things that are said, are truly a blessing to someone. So thank you for your willingness to share your story, and I would love to have you back on Churchy Chats, maybe with the panel. I don't know, but I would love to have you back.
Oh, I would be honored to come back. I really do love it. I love everything that you're doing, Alicia. I love your work, and I appreciate you. I'm so grateful that you even considered me for this opportunity. I can't wait for us to stay connected so that we can continue to partner. But I would love to come back and be a guest anytime you need me. I'll be here for
Wonderful,
you.
wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. We are in full throttle of our season 3 of Churchy Chats, and I'm so excited because that there are so many God ordained connections that's happening, and we have so much to share with you as we continue this season. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your continued support. Next week we have another exciting show lined up for you. Make sure you share it. Listen, even if you went through this whole broadcast and maybe the Lord dropped somebody on your heart, make sure you share with them so that they can get the word that God has for them, because I truly believe that every single show, every single interaction, every single interview is meant for someone to hear, to help, to bless, to inspire. Listen, again, next week is going to be an awesome show, so make sure you meet us here, same place, same time, on Churchy Chats with the Church Girl. Until next time, stay churchy, folks. Good night.